Hello and welcome to Top 10 Thursdays on Big Train TV. I'm Alex Drain, and throughout the summer we'll be counting down the top 10 games in Bethesda Big Train history. This week we start at number 10 on the list, an exciting game from July 31st, 2005 that pitted the Bethesda Big Train against the Rockville Express. For this week's episode, we'll be speaking to former Big Train General Manager Alex Thompson, current and then Big Train Manager Sal Colangelo, as well as former Big Train players Steve Fay and Greg Lemon. We've got a great show covering a great game on tap, so let's get started. The 2005 Bethesda Big Train season started out with new beginnings. The franchise had moved from the Clark Griffith League into the newly formed Cal Ripken League before the season and had appointed a new manager in Sal Colangelo. The team was powered by a strong core of players, many of which had returned from the 2004 season, and built on that familiarity for 2005.
In 2005, I think what was really important was we just had some good continuity of players. I mean, we had a lot of guys back. We picked up a few players from the Herndon Club, and we all basically knew each other. We had known each other for a while. We had stayed in touch over the off season.
This was a scrappy group of players, and they had fun all season long. It was just a really positive summer in terms of fan interaction and connection with the players. It felt like a pretty close knit family, between the players and the fans and the organization.
Going into the 2005 season, new league. We had just come off from winning the Clark Griffith League and going to nationals. We had a couple people from the Herndon team that came over with us that kind of dropped out with Rhett Teller and Steve Fay and those guys. And it was going to be promising. And we started slow. We picked it up, and we got to the last three games. And I believe the last three games, we had to win the last three games to win the regular season outright.
Indeed, the Big Train came down to the wire that season in a battle to win the league regular season championship, staring down the reality of having to win the final three games of the season in order to win the title. In the first of those last three games, the Big Train defeated the Silver Spring Tacoma Thunderbolts in a dramatic 7-6 victory. The next day was July 31st, 2005, and the Big Train headed into Rockville, Maryland to take on the Express. And facing Rockville that year, the team always knew it was going to be a battle.
Rockville, it was always an intense rivalry until they left the league a year or so ago. It was always an intense rivalry. It got worse as the years went on when Coach Sizemore and Mario came over to coach with me when they left Rockville. But they were Coach Schaefer and those guys. They did a good job with them, coached them up. And it was just the Bethesda Big Train to New York Yankees of summer baseball. Everybody wants to play in Bethesda. Everybody wants to beat the Big Train. And they took it to another level. So it was exciting, and just every time we played them, it was who's gonna make the fewest amount of mistakes, who's gonna catch the ball, who's gonna execute the fundamentals, and who's gonna throw strikes.
The Express were a really good team. I was actually looking back at the roster. The Express had more future pros on it than the Big Train did. Earlier in the season, they had Joe Smith, who's still playing in the major leagues. He wasn't there the full season, but he was on that team. Justin Siegel played in the pro and had a long minor league career. Adam Olbrakowski had a minor league career. RJ Brown. I mean, these are guys that went on to have, lengthy professional careers. And not to say that the Big Train didn't have its own share of guys who went on to play at least minor league baseball, but the Big Train's mentality was more of just more of a scrappy, fundamental, play hard type of team.
The Big Train carried that mentality into this game as they faced a bitter rival. The good news on that hot July afternoon was that Bethesda had a starter they believed in on the mound, Derek Caldwell.
Caldwell was just a kind of a quiet, steady, consistent guy, both on and off the field. He was very kind with the fans, lent a lot of his time to the fans, and the organization was, was clearly appreciative to be there. And then in big spots, he was just reliable on the mound.
When Derek was on, he was so tough to hit, and he was just cruising through the game. And I just think fitness and fatigue with the weather and everything got to him either the fifth or sixth inning. We had to make a change. But, Derek there too, when he was on the mound, he was focused, ready to go. And he was throwing a gem. He kept them at bay, and then we had to go to the bullpen.
On that day, Derek Caldwell was cruising. Through 7 innings, he allowed just 1 run, having erased 3 base runners on double play balls and doing what he could to put the team in position to win. The offense through 7 innings also did their part. Bethesda got 1 in the 2nd inning and 2 in the 4th, and then tacked on 1 more in the top of the 7th. All 4 Big Train runs were in some part due to express errors, something that the Big Train were well prepared to capitalize on.
Greg and Andrew and Johnny Noble and those guys, they're going to make you pay with the mistakes. They're going to take the extra base. You make an error at second, there's a good chance Smitty or Johnny are going to be on second. And that's just putting the pressure on them as you played. And, we tried to make the best of it when they did make mistakes, because that's when you want to take advantage and have the advantage to try to win a game.
My recollection, Rockville had a tough field at times. It was a day game. They didn't get a lot of water on their field. You guys know the DC area, we're always having an annual drought in July. Tough field, but as Sal said, teams make mistakes. You try to take advantage of them.
The Big Train did take advantage of it, and through 7 innings, they had built a 4-1 advantage thanks to the combined work of the opportunistic offense and Caldwell. Caldwell began to break down in the 8th, and after allowing a pair of base runners, it was time to go to the bullpen. Even with a troublesome inning brewing, Bethesda still felt confident.
Those guys that we had in the 7th, 8th, 9th inning were as good as anyone in the league, and Derek Caldwell, who maybe isn't a traditional every 5th day starter, is able to go out and get you into the 6th or 7th.
The first arm that manager Sal Colangelo went to out of the bullpen was righty Robbie Smithson out of Lipscomb, followed up by left-hander Brett Tidball from Maryland.
For Robbie, at times, I believe, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, he started some for us. He was a big guy out of Lipscomb, started some for us, and then we felt that he was better out of the pen. And I believe we brought Tidball, came in at times in matchup situations, and then that was the whole plan along when you play 3 games right in a row, big games, to get to Wyatt.
Unfortunately, the relieving arms had a bumpy inning, with Smithson giving up a bunt single and then a 2 RBI hit to the Express's Mike Murphy. The game was then 4-3, and while Tidball did a solid job of cleaning up the inning, it wasn't before surrendering the game-tying hit on a bloop single to Rockville's Matt Edgecombe. Tidball ended the frame on a pair of flyouts, but heading to the 9th, it was now 4-4. In the top of the 9th inning, Bethesda went down in order, and in the bottom half of the frame, Tidball allowed a base runner who eventually got up to 3rd after wreaking havoc on the base paths. But the sure hand of Trey Cuevas behind the plate squeezed the 3rd strike to end the inning, a typical play for the strong catcher.
So Trey sort of behind the dish was very similar to what Greg was in the infield, what Kleckler was in the outfield, and Johnny Noble as well. I'm sure we'll talk about Johnny, but he was just fundamentally solid, and really played every pitch as hard as he possibly could.
Heading into extras, the Big Train faced an additional challenge, besides just a tie game and a must-win contest against a bitter rival. They also were looking at the possibility of a tie if they couldn't win it in the 10th. In 2005, the Rockville Express's stadium still lacked lights, and though the game's start time was earlier to accommodate that fact, creeping darkness was setting in, and it ratcheted up the stakes accordingly.
I remember those games at Rockville that would start at 5, and it was just a race to get those games in and done, especially because Rockville's outfield at MC Rockville just felt really cavernous, and so it could get pretty dark back there deep in center field near the tree line, near where the buildings of the campus are. You hit a ball back there and you lose sight of the outfielder once it starts to get a little bit dark or dusky.
In the top of the 10th inning, Greg Lemon started the frame with his 4th single of the day, and the Big Train had the go-ahead runner on to lead off the inning. With cleanup hitter Rhett Teller stepping in, manager Sal Colangelo made a stunning decision. He wanted Teller to bunt.
Well, one, I wanted to get him over, but I was praying, because Rhett, I don't think he's ever bunted in his life. We still laugh about that. Sometimes you, as a coach, you go with your gut. I just knew with Rhett coming up, if he can get it down, you'd have a chance to get him over. With I believe was it Kleckler and Carson that were involved behind him.
Yeah.
So I'd like the opportunity. And I figured with you having Wyatt, let's get a run, and then he can get him down and be done with it.
The gutsy decision paid off for Colangelo, as Teller got the bunt down and advanced Lemon to second. The Express intentionally walked Andrew Smith and brought in submarine lefty Justin Segal, who promptly allowed a single to Brian Thomas to load the bases with only one out. That's when a hero for Bethesda stepped up. Nick Kleckler, who scored Lemon on an RBI single to give the Big Train a 5-4 lead. And to the team and its fans, Kleckler coming up big in the clutch was no surprise.
Kleckler was probably one of the best athletes out there. He could run like a deer. He could do it all.
Kleckler was like a just sort of like a high energy speed guy. Wasn't the tallest guy on the team, had a ton of range, but sort of like Greg Lemon, just threw it all on the line.
Nick Kleckler, just scrappy, but really a good hitter, good contact hitter, and just could run like the wind.
Following Kleckler's big hit, Drew Carson would plate Smith on a sacrifice fly, and again, this was par for the course for a key player like Carson.
Carson just smooth, sweet swinging, really just a heck of a player, and I just recall him making everything look really just so easy.
After Carson's sacrifice, a pass ball would score Thomas, and following the conclusion of the top of the 10th, it was now a 7-4 Big Train advantage. A 3-run lead in a huge game meant it was time for one of the best closers in club history to take the mound and slam the door, Wyatt Stewart.
We knew if we got to late in the innings, 7th, 8th, 9th, 9th inning, bringing in a Wyatt Stewart, and I think Wyatt might still hold or shares the record for most saves. He just came in and got it done. It was unorthodox, but he got it done.
Unorthodox it was, but he did get it done. Stewart allowed a pair of singles, but no runs to finish a dramatic 7-4 win for the Big Train. The next day, Bethesda won again to clinch the outright regular season championship. In the postseason, the team shared the title with the Silver Spring Tacoma Thunderbolts. Looking back, that 2005 team was truly special, and this game helped to cement its legacy.
That 05 team has built the foundation of what I've done, the culture and the community to today, because of this, what I've learned from that team. You don't have to have big name schools, the big name players to be successful and to enjoy the summer. We
really had a true blue collar, just work a day group of guys, tremendous bullpen, and we had a good defense as well. Brian Thomas at third base. I mean, he made, the games weren't on webcast then. He made 10 plays a week that would have been ESPN plays. So I mean, we really had a great group, a fun group, and I'm glad to see that the sort of foundations that we laid in 04 and 05 have been carried on now for 15 years.
That does it for this week's edition of Top 10 Thursdays. Next week, we'll be looking at game number 9 on the list, which took place in July 2004. Until then, keep your eye out for more great content on Big Train TV, and we'll see you next Thursday. So long, and have a good week, everybody.
Hi, Big Train fans. So we're starting up the Bethesda Community Baseball Club again to run the Big Train baseball at Shirley Povich Field. We got to do a little fundraising. So we got a special treat for you. The first 100 people who send $100 to our Bethesda Community Baseball Club by going to www.bigtrain.org and pushing the donate button, get this cool mask. You know you want this mask. You don't want to go out this summer without the Big Train mask. So if you could go to www.bigtrain.org, hit the donate button, you can get the first 100 people get a mask who give $100 or more. You can buy a season pass for 2021, and you can even buy seat plaques at Povich Field, so your family can be part of Povich Field. So thank you from the Bethesda Community Baseball Club for any help you can give us to raise these startup funds to make sure we can bring the fun back to Povich Field in 2021. Thank you.
I'll tell you this, I see when I go to Washington and I see people, I can't tell you how many parents, for instance, come to me and say, you know, my kid grew up at Shirley Povich Field. They played baseball there all the time. All these teams were able to use the field. I mean, it was, you know, it was so gratifying to us.